Okay. Hi, welcome. My name is Allison Locker. I'm the director of the UIS Visual Arts Gallery. And thanks so much for joining us this evening for an artist talk by Heather Bennett. Her exhibition, Night Watch: Origin of the World, is currently on view at the gallery and will remain on view through November 16th. So please come by and check it out. And we're very happy to have Heather here, and I'd like to introduce her. Heather Bennett maintains a multimedia practice, which consists of photography, video, drawing, text, sculpture, installation, as well as collaborations with musicians and writers. Her work traces the female subject and its historic irrelevance, focusing specifically on representation in contemporary culture. Bennett attempts to reveal an embodied subjecthood held within her protagonists. Pushing expectations of media, she disrupts assumptions, hoping to realign and reframe the relegated, feminine tinged space to even recreate this space anew. Bennett has been featured in numerous solo and group exhibitions, nationally and internationally. She is currently a senior lecturer at Washington University in St. Louis. So, Heather, thanks for joining us, and I will hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you for having me, Allison and Bella. It's been a real pleasure working with you and getting the chance to put some stuff in that lovely space. So I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. Oh, already technical difficulties. Let me go back to the beginning there. I shared the wrong one. Okay, so here I am. This is an image of me at a show I did in Monaco. So that never opened in 2020. But as Allison said, mostly my work is focusing on the female image in contemporary media and questioning certain assumptions and ways that image is portrayed. Currently, I've been, in the past, I've used myself in a lot of the work in questioning that imagery, the idea of the artist subject kind of standing in for the female objectified body and kind of bringing those two together, much like the 70s feminists did. But recently, my work and the work that's in the gallery at University of Illinois at Springfield, that hopefully you have seen or will see, is really trying to do that by taking the body out, talking about that body in a really different way. So I'm going to get to an image here. So I'm going to go back to some of that earlier work and show you some of that first before I come back to what's in the gallery and those bodies of work. So this is a trilogy from a trilogy of videos.
I have to attend a school Zoom while I'm on this.
So this is from a trilogy of videos called the Empire Trilogy. And that, let's see if we can. No, I can't. Okay. Oops. This is, so there are 3 videos, obviously, in the trilogy, and there are about 2.5 minutes each. And they are referencing certain kinds of these characters, female characters, of these amalgams of children's fairy tales, fashion, and contemporary advertising media, as well as like kind of a good dose of nostalgia, and kind of smashing those references together to create a character. So the idea is really like that this character is kind of this sort of ridiculous combination in a visual, and yet has some kind of individuality and some kind of composure or grace. And so thinking about all of the influences that we have when we're walking through the world, and how we still maintain ourselves and our core. So these images are coupled with soundtracks. I worked with a musician to write original soundtracks for each of these videos. So this piece is called Babe, and it is a combination of these sort of extremes of sexual stereotyping: the Paul Bunyan kind of mythic male plaids, and the schoolgirl skirts. So that plaid playing dual duty. The idea of the very sexualized schoolgirl uniform. And then, of course, the babe also doing dual duty as the babe, the blue ox, and the babe in the photo. This is a still from one of the other videos in that trilogy called Holly Holy. And the this one I used myself. This one I used some people in my environment. This is Eve, Eve of biblical fame, and the Little Red Riding Hood, and she's reading Light in August by Faulkner. So you see her kind of grasping this apple there. So again, these kinds of jamming together these different cultural influences and coming up with this kind of strange amalgam. This is Locks and Hawks. So this is the 50s housewife, kind of, you think of the commercial with her sparkling smile next to the lemon fresh joy, but then also Goldilocks and the Three Bears. And the Locks and Hawks is from, she's stirring a plate of beans or a pot of beans and ham hocks as she's kind of staring out the window. And all of these videos are there's a kind of intimation of a narrative, but nothing happens. The music is really the emotion of the pieces. So it's almost like their inner monologue, where they are very still and very much more like a kind of dream. So I'm going to play just a tiny bit of one of these so you can kind of get a feel. First off, though, this slide is up, which is a portfolio I made of these works. So you can see down in the right-hand corner is a record, a vinyl record. I made a 10-inch vinyl record that I had lathe cut of the tracks from these videos. And then there were these prints from stills and these kind of poetic pieces about each of the three videos that were in this box set. I like to make books when I make work for some reason. That's always part of it. But here is a little bit from Locks and Hawks. So you see that the tracks are very loud and emotional, and it really talks about again her kind of like inner that sort of inner core that holds that grace of all of those assumptions that are around her. The musician that worked on those pieces is Joe Roglani. He does a lot of experimental music and is based here in St. Louis. A great artist. Okay. So next I'm going to move on to a body of work called Four Stories. And this work was leaning more into that narrative, that kind of narrative intimation, and using the idea of narrative tropes or the assumptions that we have about characters within a certain narrative, specifically the female character, and what role she might be playing. And in a lot of these scenes are kind of cliched scenes where she's more of an accessory. And so by that narrative, I'm kind of capitalizing on those assumptions, but then kind of quoting a time period and a sort of type of scene, but then breaking it a little bit to sort of reveal her a little more as a subject. So the subject's trying to kind of subtly break out of these kinds of assumed roles. So this is a piece called Crush, and these are all large pieces, like the two photographic pieces in the gallery that are about 44 by 63, 65 framed. This is an image of Crush in installation at an exhibition that I was in the summer of 2022. This is, again, I said I make books with a lot of my pieces. So when I made that piece Crush, I wasn't, or I had the idea to make it, I was unsure if it was an image, a video, or a story. So I wrote a story before I made the image. And I wrote the story really focusing on that image and describing that image. But then at the end of the story, it questions the existence of that image. And then, of course, I put it in a book with picturing the image that is questioned of being there. And so the idea of that kind of circularity was to talk about the shiftiness and the sort of invisibility of the female subject, and how it's kind of hard to grasp onto even now. This is Anniversary B&D. This is another one of the images in 4 Stories. The titles there often are referring to literature. So this Anniversary B&D is referring to The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And you see some, excuse me, quotations of that time and that kind of characterization within this image. So again, it's broken by this kind of these sort of certain contemporary kinds of objects or pieces within the place. So referencing something, referring to a kind of narrative, but then breaking it. With that piece, I also worked with a writer. I worked with Jen Logan Meyer, and she wrote these 4 texts about this piece here, Anniversary B&D. And I had one female voice record these 4 texts, which were all under 4 different women's names, and we installed them across from the piece in the gallery. And again, getting to that idea of the kind of difficulty of kind of grasping on to that embodied female subject, and the idea of this sort of irreconcilable narrative with these 4 tracks. This is I made another record with this piece. So this was of the sound pieces of the female voice reading the 4 tracks. This was lathe cut into plexi and done in a limited edition. This is Texas. So this was this was one of the last images in 4 Stories that I did. And all of these images had other images within the series. So I'm showing you kind of the hero images, but there was also different views and different viewpoints from each kind of scene. This is called On the Road. This was one of the obviously black and white photographs in that series, 42 by 42. And this title, of course, referring to Jack Kerouac's On the Road. And so again, quoting this time period, but really having it not really match that, or kind of looks like late 60s in this piece. But then also talking about that, her in the driver's seat, and really, the idea of on the road, that even in the time that I made this piece, or even now, there's different concerns for the female subject that could not be on the road in the same way that Kerouac was when he wrote that famous text, which we'll feature later. So next I'm going to talk about a body of work that 2 of the pieces are in the gallery. This is from a body of work called The Photos of Gifts. So it's kind of like this blatant title that really refers to what it actually is, which I've wrapped photographs with fashion advertisements and magazine pages and then photographed them. So the idea is to really kind of, again, sort of disrupt the assumptions of the photographic space, which is a space of illusion, right? Depicting people and objects. And in these photographs, you see photographs of photographs. So you see real space, but you also see flattened images within that photographic space. So disrupting that, but also taking that image, that flattened fashion advertisement image of the woman, and literally wrapping her around an object and tying her with a bow. So thinking about almost kind of talking about the objectified female body with a bit of tongue in cheek. And these are, well, I'll show you a few more. The titles are also a little bit diaristic and slightly performative, because they refer to the gift, the actual gift, and the person who it was given to. So they seem quite somewhat incongruous with the images that you see. And that is to kind of hint at this other possibility, or this other place that these images are. So I'm thinking of them as objects in transition. So the gifts are wrapped and primped and kind of packaged, much like the art object, much like the female body, and thinking of like my own kind of self performance in how I represent myself. So also, as you can see in this one, there is a little bit of, in some of the images more than others, a little bit of a fetishistic reference in some of them. And again, kind of invoking, as in many of the image, invoking a little bit of humor within an earnestness. I think that a lot of times contradiction gets closer to what I'm trying to say. So the idea that like something real and something fictive together brings something more apparent to the fore. Similarly, like humor within a kind of earnestness, or care and criticality, which I think that these works talk about, because as I said in the beginning, talking about like a certain kind of like assumed to be feminine space. So these pieces with their ribbons and bows, they're kind of like staying within an expected, maybe like cliched kind of idea of stereotypically feminine space. But kind of taking that and running with it. So bringing the critical into that space, as well as elevating the idea of care. So giving someone a gift, but also letting that be within a gallery space or a museum space, and asking questions. That those things, I'm kind of talking about those things that maybe seem like contradictions as not being so. So this is another one in that series called Sassy Rough Dress for Sherry, where you're starting to see this kind of pattern of the titling. Tux Ruffles for Choreos. And again, these are all framed 44 by 65. Somebody with a little hammer for JLM. And then this is a installation shot of a show I had in 2017 of some of these works at Bruno David Gallery. So you also see in the back there the painted wall, which is something obviously I did at the Springfield Gallery. So you can kind of see where some of that sprang, but also just thinking about taking that packaging of the gifts and the packaging of the art object and expanding it out onto that art object. So these images often have framing that is kind of color coordinated with the images as well as the walls, and just really thinking of exploding out that idea of the primping of the art object, but then getting back to that contradiction where something can be beautiful and critical at the same time, or simultaneously. Okay. This is an installation I did with some of this work called Blueprint Kit for Lily. That's what the piece is called. And then I did this installation where you see I'm starting to use the mirrors that are also in the UIS gallery, and thinking about reflecting back that image that is recontextualized from the magazines into this art object, and how we think about it differently, but then also seeing our own reflection within that contemplation, and thinking about our own image and how we see that in relationship to the complication that these works try to bring to the fore. This is just a further back view of that installation. So this brings me to the images in the gallery. So this image, the Hey Baby book for Krista from 2001, this was the last image in the Photos of Gifts series that I did. And you see that, and I have some installation shots if you haven't been to the gallery space yet. And then this is an image of that piece in another show in 2021, just to kind of get a little bit of a view if you hadn't seen it in the gallery yet. This is a book I made using one of the other images in the show for the cover. This is, of all of the images, there's about 120-ish of them. So I like kind of thinking them also curatorially as these kinds of palettes and these groupings that are also part of that idea of curating, but yet packaging. So this is going to the, so the works in the show are kind of a collision of two bodies of work, that Photos of Gift work and these drawings and videos that are from a body of work called Midnight Special. And those bodies of work were brought together in the show in the UIS gallery. Midnight Special was another attempt for me to talk about the objectification of the female body without picturing that actual body. So pulling the body out and talking about it through its absence, I found in some ways it has a stronger presence. So I'm talking about that body through this garment, this lingerie piece of garment here, and drawing that, and that garment, because of its sexualized nature, has a kind of objectification is sort of embedded in it, and almost the body and that objectification of that body becomes almost more pulled into the space through these drawings than the actual body. So this is an installation that I did at Monaco again in 2020 for a show that was supposed to open, I think, March 13th. It was like right when lockdown happened. So it stayed up for a long time, but nobody really saw it, which was really interesting because this work talking about absence and talking about it in maybe a little bit of a cheeky kind of way became something very different when it couldn't be seen. So you see that chaise longue there is on top of a rows of mirrors. So the idea for that piece, and there's a book, this is a detail of that, there's a book laid in front of that chaise, and the idea was that the viewer would lay down on their stomach and read that book, which also through language, that book quotes an objectified female body on the streets of New York City without picturing it. It's through catcalls. And so the idea was that the viewer would lay on their stomach to read that and kind of like, looking at themselves in this sort of this Narcissus kind of way, but also that posturing being sort of the subject themselves or the body themselves. However, in COVID, that was not only was the gallery not open, but that idea of laying on a piece of furniture that other people laid on would not go over well. So it was really interesting to think about our own absence from each other at that time and how this work transformed into something much more poignant than when I originally installed it, just while it was up. So again, back to this piece that is in the UIS gallery. And so I was interested in, drawing this garment, these two parts of this garment, this top and this bottom, and thinking about this piece as this kind of, representative of the lower part of the female body as a kind of bottom, but also how it replicates the idea of, the title references the origin of the world, references Courbet's famous painting, The Origin of the World, which is a similar point of view where you just see this female body with heads and arms and legs cropped off. So she's essentialized as this singular part. So I was interested in that aspect of this photograph, and then placing across the gallery from this photograph, facing it as this photograph, which is almost the opposite viewpoint. So you have this woman's face that goes across the entire image. So those two almost as this foil, and the only representatives of the actual body within the gallery. So this is a gallery view of the installation up right now, and you see the drawing that I showed you in the previous installation slide there, and this video and this image, ref Stevie t-shirt for JLM. So this video drawn is talking about it is a video of the same garment kind of blowing, but it being very dark and very black, and then projected onto this piece of leather. It becomes almost like light, sparkling light moving. And so it's really mimicking the drawings, which use a kind of iridescent ink. So that's where the title Drawn comes from, but also projected onto the skin is, again, talking about the body, talking about the objectified body kind of viscerally, and that idea of being drawn and quartered. So this is the another installation of that piece drawn as it is installed at the UIS gallery on the mirrors. So seeing the mechanisms of display and then having those mirrored up on this piece as well is an important part of that, that construction of that piece. And then this piece, this drawing is called Night Watch. And the way that is hung with these silver clips, that also kind of meant to reference that idea of drawn and quartered within this this kind of conversation these pieces are having about this absent body. This title Night Watch comes from the 1936 novel Nightwood by Dewana Barnes, which was really influential to me at the time I was making this body of work. It's obviously an old text that has this incredible contemporary resonance. The writing is incredible, but the two characters, main characters, are female, and one is very she's very wild and constantly stealing away at night to kind of satiate these desires. And yet it talks about in the novel how vulnerable she is in doing that as a woman alone at night. And that was something that really resonated with me, just in still in my own reality. But the idea of that kind of that female subject, and her kind of, and all her complexity, and yet that fragility that she must endure. So these are another two drawings that are in the show, MS Tail, which is here, and MS Head here. So again, kind of talking about those parts, the fragmentation of the body in its absence, really talking about that essentializing, like in the Courbet painting, of the female body as parts. So this is going back to the Dewana Barnes. This is a slide of that text, and one of my favorite quotes from that text. This is also, you'll see, I'll read this, but this is also, you see where the mirrors really come to the fore. And this whole book kind of had a palette for me in my mind, which is very much about what you see in the gallery. Whenever she was met at the opera, at a play, sitting alone and apart, the program faced down on her knee, one would discover in her eyes, large, protruding and clear, that mirrorless look of polished metals, which report not so much the object as the movement of the object. As the surface of a gun's barrel reflecting a scene will add to the image the portent of its construction. So her eyes contracted and fortified the play before her in her own unconscious terms. So there's this kind of like objectification of her own gaze, as well as this reference to her agency and how she is creating her subjective view, that I found really important in this, and really representing how the kind of even beyond duality, but the sort of expansion of what the mirrors do, like in like multiplying this reality and point of view. Okay. So this is another installation view from UIS, and you see there at the bottom, you see those mirrors coming in. So again, reflecting the piece back on itself, but then also reflecting the viewer, and the work back into the viewer's image entering in. This is another installation shot. It's kind of sometimes hard to photograph these very black pieces. This is another work that is in the gallery right now. This is called Midnight Special Top, right here, and Midnight Special Bottom. So these are actual photographs of the garment that acted as the subject for these drawings that you see in the gallery and the video. This is one of the images, so you can just see more clearly the image from Midnight Special Top. This is a body of work that I am working on now, that is different from the ones that are in the gallery, obviously. This is a piece from a series called Girl, Girl. This piece is called Pine Valley. So what I was interested in here was representing the idea of female friendship, and representing that friendship as it is often seen in, well, it's not often seen, that's the thing. It's not often seen in literature and movies. We maybe more so now, but there's kind of a dearth. Like we don't have the equivalent of a buddy movie. And I was interested in that, and that when it is represented, it's often represented as kind of hysterical or combative or hyperbolic in some way. So I was really interested in representing that that union, in the same picture, representing how it is I actually experience those friendships, along with that kind of essentialized or extreme way that it is represented in contemporary media. So this image is referencing the movie Heathers, which is, if you've seen the 80s movie Heathers, it's talk about hyperbolic and hysterical female friendship. There it is. So we're kind of dressed in that 80s garb, and that's quoting that. And yet the gesture and the union that is showed there, this kind of inviolability of the two figures, kind of breaks that. So I was really interested in that contradiction in the same picture. And again, you see, I got hooked on the colored frames and the presenting of the work. These are some collages that I did during the pandemic. And these just kind of showing some variety of media. The way that I was working with these was just taking walks like we were all doing, and then taking photographs on the walk, and then coming back with the photograph and letting that be an inspiration for a collage. And I was really interested in doing this because my work, normally I'm working from idea to realization of the work. And I liked this idea of being more instinctual and letting the another image or the materials kind of guide the creation of the work, because that's not usually how I work. And so it was really interesting to sort of flip that script and see what happened. So this is a piece called White Wedding. And these are collages with a lot of times with leather remnants. This is called D&G Rodeo. And this is called Buick McCain. So the last work I'm going to talk about is a couple pieces that are up right now at the Luminary on Cherokee in St. Louis. There's a group show there called Two Pillar, Two Platform, which is a really great, diverse show. If you're in St. Louis, please check it out. There's some great artists represented there. But what I did in this show was react to an older piece of mine. So as I had said earlier, a lot of my earlier work was using my own body within the photographs to talk about that shift from the object of the photo to the subject, to the artist's subject, and kind of taking that sort of formulation of 70s feminist artists as a structure and using myself for that reason. So this work was from 2005 called Judy, where I represented myself as this kind of B movie actress. So I took that photograph, and in reacting to it, I photographed her. So I say her, it's funny, but I pulled it out of the storage, and was in plastic. I photographed her. So this was a smaller photograph that I made from doing that, called Judy Veiled. Then I also filmed her. So thinking about this piece that was really talking about, talking about a gaze, the male gaze in particular, but thinking about my own gaze. And so in picturing myself, I'm creating a kind of gaze, but I'm not actually looking through the lens. I need somebody or a mechanism, an automatic release to take this image. So in this work, I'm gazing at that final image many years later, and thinking about that kind of stacking of subjects of this character that I'm playing, this kind of again, this kind of cliched character that I'm playing in order to push at a subject, but then also reference her as being gazed upon. So it's a fictional character, but it's also me. But then it's looking at it much later and gazing through a lens at that. So interrogating my own gaze was really important part of this work. But also thinking about how that piece changed over time, for me, but also just kind of in its existence. So this piece is called Judy Concatenated. So the framed original piece from 2005 is hung on the wall, and I projected on top of it. And then I created a sound piece with a musician, John Lumley, and he did guitar, and I wrote a text that I read, and I'll play a little bit of that. I think we might have time to play the whole thing, so it's only a couple minutes, but I'm going to play that now.
You think you are old, but that was over 18 years ago. It is a bit funny, though not hysterical, that I called you an aging B-movie actress back then. Oh, what I wouldn't give. And I look at you with regret, even though you are mine and always have been. Would they have charged you with narcissism if you didn't look like that? Would they now? I don't think they would care, fortunately, predictably. You look so forlorn playing your role, playing at being an object, a one-dimensional character with predictable despair. You were actually quite believable, better than you thought, maybe. But still, you were strong and in control underneath. You were the one with the vision, and you knew it. You stayed quiet about it, though, because knowing was enough. And it is still there, though muted by exhaustion and responsibility, and an unease that all too closely resembles your act. The mind and the confidence were the glitter for you, even though they assumed this is not what you relied on. This seems admirable, but hard to remember, despite that being the provocation, the sticky bit. You dared them to see, but you never thought you were relevant or vogue then in that Navy Sub 40 stunner, with your great-grandmother's ostrich feather shrug on your shoulders and your mother's two small red satin heels, gloved hand holding the red roses your sister prepared down by your side as if they were a burden. Yes, you were a bit sentimental, using generations of women as nearly silent symbols, lending a veiled depth to your critique as you rejected the assumptions of your appearance. But how do you hold spectacle and depth in one body for so long without something oozing out? Maybe this is the exhaustion, the burden, the fight. Your frivolity was put on, meant to be a challenge, even a trap. Your full red pout, a cliche and a dare. You are a decoy, a lie, trying your viewers, judging them, implicating them with a turn of the body and your surface sadness that reflects your fictive fear that they will soon not see you. And I know, you were not seen then and you will not be seen later, but differently. You are a picture of fight, a beautiful picture. I made you, but you are enmeshed with me, and I see now.
Okay. I hope you could hear that okay. So I am open to questions or going back to anything that you'd like to see or talk about further.
Heather, thank you so much. That was really wonderful. And I do have a question, and I'm happy to kick things off here. I'm really interested in your interest in writing and music as companions to your work. And your work is very thoughtful, very deliberate. You know, you're not making any inclusions by accident. So I'm curious about the works that have these like original soundtracks, and how you see those functioning. And also, I'm just curious about the process, like what comes first, and can they exist independently of one another?
Yeah, great question. I love really like engaging in different medias and different practices and making this singular piece. So like with these the Empire trilogy pieces, the ideas for these came to me with the tracks in my head. Like it was one thing. Like I didn't know exactly what those tracks sounded like because I worked with my friend Joe to make those things come alive, but I never saw those videos before the alone or before the music was there. So it was just about like really wanting that to be the piece, and then going about, you know, working and like bringing in another sensibility and collaborating and making that happen. The piece, this piece, Anniversary B&D, where I worked with my friend Jen Logan Meyer, who's an incredible writer, that came after, actually, because she was really interested in the work and in the piece, and she wrote one short text about the work, and I was just really interested in that. And then she ended up writing a few more, and then it just kind of started to happen, where I'm like, this we need to bring these in, we need to look at these with the work. And I like how it expands what I was already thinking, because writing can be so many things for me in the work. Sometimes it is the actual work, like in this piece or in that last piece we just heard, where the writing is part of the piece. But a lot of times it is writing about the work where it starts to expand for me ideologically, and I start to kind of realize even more what I was after. That sounds kind of crazy that, like, you know, I just said before, I go from idea to realization, but, you know, idea sometimes is this huge thing that you are still kind of working out after the piece is made. So when I write about it, a lot of times I see things that I didn't necessarily know before. And so writing has taken so many characters in the work that is so important to my process. And that last piece, I had already made, Judy was working on the Judy Concatenated when I was writing for the show a little blurb about this piece. And I thought, why don't I just write to her? And then that told so much more about what was happening and what the piece was doing. It was what the piece was doing, rather than telling the audience what the piece was doing. So that really changed how I thought about that work as well. I think that the writing it's just such a transformative tool for me. And also, you know, collaborating with somebody and bringing in another practice, like with this piece, my music friend John, who's the musician who played the guitar, I just told him I want this really heavy feedback guitar. I want it to fight with the voice. I want them to be right here at each other, where you can hear her but almost not. And it was really very aligned with his practice and how he's writing. So we came together pretty seamlessly to make that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Other questions for Heather?
Hi, Heather. Thanks for your talk. It was great. I myself occasionally work with images of myself in my work. And I'm just wondering if you find any difference in your approach or process when you put yourself in there versus working with others or models.
That's a great question. And something that was I really struggled with in the beginning. It's really hard to use yourself in your work, I think. You know, your work is putting yourself out there anyway. And then you kind of do it in this twofold kind of way. It's really terrifying, actually. But when I was making the first bodies of work where I started using myself, which I don't have in this presentation, but, you know, similarly to, you know, some of this work, I realized, you know, I was talking about women's images in contemporary media, and I realized like that I wanted to do that photographically, because I was trying to do it in painting, which was, you know, not that interesting, or not really getting at what I wanted, let's say. And then I realized that if I'm going to use photography, I have to use myself, because it only makes sense that subject object shift, and like quoting that you know, that process that was done by artists like Hannah Vilke and Cindy Sherman in the past, where using themselves expanded the subject, but also talked about the gaze and talked about the female body as the object. And I wanted that complication, but also I felt like I had to use myself because I felt like that's the only body that I could do that I could put in there. that I had the right to put in there and to talk about. So it was kind of like I felt like I had to roll my eyes at myself when I was like, oh my God, you have to use yourself. This is terrible. But because I'm kind of an introvert, and so that was sort of a nightmare, but I knew it was the way to go. So I just kind of had to push through it. So I hope that maybe you're coming to some kind of acceptance or joy in using your own image.
I don't know that I'm there yet, but maybe someday. But thanks for your answer. That's great to hear.
Other questions for Heather? All right. Well, Heather, thank you so much. What a wonderful exhibition. And I want to remind everybody that this show is on view. Heather's show, Night Watch: Origin of the World, is on view through November 16th. It's a lovely exhibition. So please come by and see it. And thanks again to Heather. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Bella. I so appreciate your support.
Of course. All right. Have a great night, everybody.
Have a great night, Heather.
Thank you.